Hi everyone, this is Richard. In this video, we're going to go over RenderLoop and ResourceManager. So this is still some of the fundamentals of StageXL. We're just in the very beginnings, just the setup mostly. Now that we've said this is where we want to put the element, and this is what we're just setting the stage, setting for the program that we're actually doing. What we're going to use is the render loop next. And the render loop basically is just like it sounds. It's a loop. So when we went through this application before, what we noticed is that the image was starting up here, it's moving down. And as it moves down, what we do is we get it, we redraw it down here, and we keep redrawing it itself until it makes that motion or the animation. So what the render loop actually does is that it creates an actual loop. So anytime you get an object moving it from one place to the other, you need a loop to get that motion going on. So that's what it is. And the way in which it does it is through a stream. So it opens up a stream, sends it to the browser and says, move from one place to the other. And once it hits certain characteristics, then it does something else. But that's where the stream actually gets opened up. All right. Interestingly, as soon as you instantiate this, the render loop, it automatically starts. You don't need to actually start it separately. Notice there is, when we look at the methods themselves, there's a start and a stop. So this is not the same thing. So start, like I said, it automatically starts. We don't need to do that. But you can actually stop it. For example, I'm just going to say, like, if you had like a video game or something like that and it was moving and you wanted to stop it midway through, you could probably hit the render loop and it actually will stop it. Hit a button and it'll stop the stream, and then you can hit the start and it'll start back up again. Okay, that is probably not the best way to do a pause because it would start the stream all over again, so the object would go back to the very beginning. So that's not a great way to stop things, but I'm just saying that that's what you could potentially do. From what I understand, it's not completely clear, but once you open up render loop, once you start it, it does not automatically stop. So even though it finishes its task, it doesn't actually stop the stream in and of itself. So that can be a problem if you have a lot of things going on in terms of memory leaks. So in other words, you're taking up memory for every stream you open up. So if it's done completely and you have nothing else to do, make sure that you do stop it in the future. That's going to be mostly for really big, huge programs. For small things like this, it doesn't make a big difference. But again, if you want to make your programs really long, something to keep in mind. All right. Other methods for the render loop is the add stage. So we know that we're going to start doing some animation because of the render loop. All right. So there's some type of motion going to be done. And then what we're going to say is, what are we going to actually do? Where are we going to actually do it? Right. So it's going to be on this particular stage. Remember, if there are different stages elsewhere, it would be on different stages. But in this particular stage, we have to say, okay, I'm going to do this some action, and I'm going to add this particular stage right here. All right? As opposed to adding a different stage somewhere else. So that's what the logic behind it is. So we have where we're going to do something. We have the fact that we're going to do something. Now we're going to have to say, what are we going to actually do? What object are we going to have something done to it? Okay, so in other words, we know there's going to be some type of motion, but what about what are we going to move around? Well, this particular thing, we're going to move around this particular image, all right? So we have to tell the system, what image are we going to load up? And that's where ResourceManager comes in. ResourceManager is, once you instantiate it right here, ResourceManager is a class which basically says, what objects are you going to start manipulating on this particular program? All right, and so if we look at the methods here, we're going to go through all these separately here. So we can say add bitmap data, which is going to be an image, custom object, sound, text, video. So these are obviously all going to be treated differently, right? So we can't have a sound moving from one side of the screen to the other, right? Text is not going to be moving around. They're all going to be utilized differently. So for right now, we're going to use the bitmap data. And the syntax goes like this. There's going to be, for this one, ResourceManager.addBitmapData, it's going to be the name that you give it and the location of the image. So this is the image location right here. And I'm just going to call this one Dart, or I didn't call it Dart. The stagehand people who made this program called it Dart, but you get the drift. So it's going to be referred to by this name from now on, and this is the location of it. And I just added another. I put in Firefox. I downloaded it somewhere from the internet and put it in this folder. And I'm going to say, call this one Firefox, and I'm going to say add images right here itself. So that's the name of it. I could have called it anything else. Then we're going to have to do ResourceManager.load. Remember, it's an await because we have an async. And remember, anytime you access information from the file system or the hard drive or anywhere else, you want to make sure to use async await so that you can load the information up. And notice with Resource Manager, what if you have 15 things moving around? What if you have like a video game or something, or a bunch of different characters moving around? You want them all to basically have their own bit of resources, right? So we're going to load this one in, we're going to load this one in, and as you can already tell, what happens if you load too many in? Well, you're going to use too much memory, all right? So we always have to keep that in the back of our mind. Again, small things like this doesn't make a difference. Once you get much bigger, then it makes a huge difference. So if we look at the methods for Resource Manager, again, we can see add stuff. There's basically 4 fundamental concepts. You add something to the Resource Manager, okay? You remove something, okay? So if you have a character in your video game and the character dies completely, you probably want to remove them, right? Because again, you don't want to take up memory for something that's not going to be useful in the future. You can contains. So contains bitmap data, I'm going to say this is going to be a bool. So let's just say, for example, so I'm going to say bool dart equals Resource Manager contains, and I'm going to say print dart. So what I'm going to say is that if there is a problem with my system and it's not actually working, I can use this as a test. So I can create a test with, does this actually exist? Is Resource Manager is this information of Resource Manager, does this class contain the value of Dart? Which it should. So what I'm going to do is I'll save this. And let's load up the console. And it is listing it as true, okay? So it is actually working. So what if I change this to something like just D or something like that? I change it to just D. And it should be false, right? Because there is no value of anything called D right inside of there. So that's a way of testing things. And lastly, the last bit of the Resource Manager, the main feature of it is get bitmap data. Okay, so this basically says add it to the system. It's going to be inside the memory. You can utilize it. How do I know how to actually get that information itself? Now I want to get that information out of there, and that's where you use get bitmap data, and you call it by the same thing that you called it up there. Okay, so what if I change this to something like Firefox? So I'm going to get Firefox image instead of the Dart image. Again, if I had a really big program, I could get all of them, all of these images. And it's going to be the Firefox image that actually comes by, okay? So we can change things around like that. So that's the render loop and the Resource Manager. The next information is going to be more of the actual animation itself, and we'll go over that in the next video. Thanks.